And we move on to the scandal surrounding the Benghazi consulate attack hearings as they continue. There has been a lot of back and forth since the nearly 100 pages of emails were released that document what information would be used to brief the public on the attack. Democrats and Republicans are arguing over how to interpret the emails, whether they demonstrate that the administration tried to spin the story. Our guests are Kevin Cirilli, a breaking news reporter for Politico, who's covering the hearings, and Michael Rubin, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. He also is a former staff advisor at the U.S. Department of Defense. Michael, I'd like to start with you. I just wonder, is there a there? We've already had independent hearings. They were exhaustive. Now we have this new set of hearings and the release of the email. What more is there to find out about this?
Well, I'm less sure that there's any scandal and more interested in the whole issue of competence here. But there's three questions that remain unresolved in my mind. First of all, where is it that really this whole idea of the video came from when not only the Libyan government, but also the consulate in Benghazi was saying, no, this is something really quite differently. One of the scariest outcomes of this, of course, would be if Secretary of State Clinton truly believed. And inside the State Department, there really was this insulating bubble, which tended to discount the threat posed by the radical Islamism. Another question out there is whether or not, who was the one that turned down the request for more security assistance? Secretary of State Clinton is absolutely right when she says pretty much every cable in the State Department comes out with her name on it, but that raises a question. Why didn't that request come from the top? And even if funding was an issue, we had the USS Iwo Jima, a Marine Expeditionary Unit flagship, in the Red Sea, twiddling its thumbs. It could have been moved to the Mediterranean weeks before if we had known that was a problem. And the last point here really has to do with why there was this desire to prevent people in the consulate from cooperating with investigators. To me, that's one of the things which is, even if there's no there, is now prolonging the whole episode.
Well, then that begs the question, Kevin, I'd like to go to you. It seems that, Mitch McConnell said in the Sunday talk shows yesterday that the administration was making up a tale and that there's this effort to make this situation more sinister, more conspiratorial than it really is. Is there really anything other than politics going on here?
I think that there is a lot more going on than just politics, but it's an example of the fine line, if you will, that Republicans have to walk when they're questioning the administration's handling of Benghazi. The Democrats want people to think that Republicans are just playing politics with this, because if it remains a largely partisan scandal, then, of course, it doesn't really get to the next level, perhaps, of being more full-blown. But I think the central question here, and all of the questions that have been named, are why those talking points were changed, and who exactly was the one that was behind making sure that those talking points that Ambassador Susan Rice reiterated multiple times on the Sunday shows in the aftermath of that horrific tragedy. But why those talking points were changed? Why was the narrative different than and blamed on a video as opposed to terrorism? That's the central question here that I think people still don't have the answer to.
Kevin, we heard from White House aide Dan Pfeiffer making his rounds on the morning talk shows, talking about the White House not going to let all of this distract the White House from what they need to do. But can they really do that? Just the fact that he has to talk about how they're not going to talk about this, how effective can they really be in pushing the attention and pushing the attention on what the president is doing now outside of these hearings?
Well, I think Pfeiffer, for his part, also played a little bit of politics yesterday in that he said that Republicans owe Ambassador Rice an apology. But I wouldn't hold your breath. I don't think that Republicans will be apologizing to Ambassador Rice anytime soon. I think that the president is in a tough spot right now. He's taking criticism on a variety of fronts, from the IRS to Benghazi to the Department of Justice. And I think that he's got his hands full. The thing for him to do, and I think the strategy strategy that you're seeing from the president is to just continue to communicate for his involvement. And as far as the IRS goes, he's taken the American public side. But and for Benghazi, his strategy seems to largely be to keep saying that this is nothing more than politics. But I think that a new poll out just yesterday found that more than half of Americans view the Benghazi attack as something that is seriously deserving of attention. So I think there are a lot of questions still unanswered.
And I know a lot of people have a lot of questions. Michael, let me bring you back into this discussion. The State Department did release 100 pages of emails that led to the decision for the talking points that Susan Rice used when she went on the talk show circuit there. Why is that not enough transparency in this?
Well, in some cases, it may be a little bit too little, too late. One of the fundamental questions, again, is not only why these talking points were used, and that certainly raises the question of a cover-up, although in my personal opinion, what I see is basically institutions simply trying to cover their own rear end in the face of a tragedy. But one of the greater issues is, what was the United States' response to this rise of a radical Islamist threat inside Libya? I mean, we have a question. Why is it we were working with some of these militias that turned against us? That's much more of a policy question rather than a question of scandal, but ultimately it does come back upon the judgment of then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
And of course, there is also the issue, just as you just said, the issue of security. The administration already admitted in the first go-round of the hearings that the security was not sufficient. But it becomes then an issue of approval from
Unfortunately, I've just lost all audio.
Okay, all right. So sorry. While we're trying to get that back with Michael, Kevin, let me ask this question of you, because then it becomes not only an issue of policy, it becomes an issue of budget, and the Congress passing the approval to fund that type of security necessary, whether it's in Libya or any other hotspot around the world.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that we have heard rumblings of that, but Republicans were quick to criticize the Democrats as playing politics and tying this to the budget, though we are seeing on the other scandal, the IRS, Republicans trying to tie that to Obamacare, so a little bit of both going on. But there was a report out last week that largely went unnoticed, and that was that Ambassador Stevens, he is, of course, the ambassador who lost his life during that attack, that he had actually declined for further military assistance at the U.S. post in Benghazi. And I think that as the internal and external investigations, as well as more congressional hearings are underway, we'll have more details as to why Ambassador Stevens would have declined security, not once but twice, at that U.S. post in Benghazi.
Kevin, you talk about the congressional hearings, the multiple investigations. The question is, what is lost? What does the president lose in this time that is being focused on Benghazi as opposed to the other issues that he wants to put forward?
He loses a lot. Traditionally, second-term presidents have a closed window for how much time they have, and he's facing a ticking clock, really, because as we head into the midterm 2014 elections, when you look at all three of these controversies, it's really rallying and unifying the Republican base as we head into the midterm elections. Likewise, after the midterm elections, all eyes will be focused on 2016. So President Obama came into his second term really with a lot of hopes to try and get meaningful immigration reform passed, as well as perhaps even reforming the tax codes. There were a lot of initiatives that he wanted to see done. And I think that as he is now have a lot of questions to answer, he has really a credibility issue and a trust issue with the American public at this time.
All right. Kevin Cirilli, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and we thank also Michael Rubin for his brief time with us, and we apologize for the audio glitch we had there.
Thank you for having me.